Thanks so much for joining me today.
Well, thanks for having me. It's very exciting to be here and to be heading out into the Pure Flix streaming channel.
Yeah, well, I'm excited that the Dating Project is on Pure Flix, and there's so much to ask you about because you produced this film. And what I love about the Dating Project is there's so many different stories that were weaved together in a really cohesive way. And I want to get into how you did that and what that process was like. But how did you come to embrace and get involved in this project?
Well, I was working on a documentary for Empower Pictures called Irreplaceable. And I knew Catherine Fowler Sample, the other producer on this project, who is now married because of the document, partially because of the documentary. Her and I were brainstorming ideas because we knew that they were looking for other documentary pitches. So we were both single at the time, and we thought, this world, this dating world, we've been to a birthday party and there were 14 women. And I think there was maybe one or two married and the rest were single. And we're like, what is going on in the world of dating and relationships? And so we started to put together this pitch and work on it in the mornings and the evenings and trying to we wanted it to cover a broad expanse of ages to kind of the experience that everybody is going through is really the same in many ways. And certainly behaviors or ways that we approach things in our younger years ultimately affects who we are when we're older and how we approach relationships. So we pitched it and we were fortunate enough to have it be funded and to now be sitting here talking about it heading out into a new streaming venue, which is very exciting.
What does it take? Okay, so it's always fun as a viewer, right? You're watching a documentary, you can tell there's so many different pieces and parts. And in this case with the Dating Project, you're pulling together individual stories and you're tracking with them for what I would imagine would be months and months and months of time where you're revisiting them. You're so it's this streamlined sort of storyboard, but there's multiple stories going on. What does it take as a producer putting that together? And this is sort of it may be a strange question in some ways, but I'm curious to know your answer. What does it take to do that? What does that process look like?
It takes an amazing team. It takes the director, John Sipity, the editor, Cheyenne Abraham, Catherine Fowler, again, the co-producer and writer. It takes everybody coming together and fighting for the story and really digging in and saying, okay, there's so much here, but what story are we telling? And we started out certainly with a blueprint of kind of things and areas and different archetypes that we were looking for. But as is the case with real life, things change, situations change, real life takes place. And so adapting to those and being able to adapt to those, but it really goes back to the team that invested in the project and really invested in their lives. These wonderful people opened their door to a film crew and were very vulnerable. And we really wanted to take care of that and honor that in a way that they would be proud of, but in a way that spoke truth. And ultimately that hopefully helped everybody who's experiencing this dating and relationships and that world. So team, absolutely back to, we all were focused on the end goal, which was to make this the most impactful, the most powerful, entertaining, inspiring documentary that we could.
Well, and you accomplished that. And for anybody who is tuning in right now, we're talking about the Dating Project, and this is a documentary that you can watch right now on Pure Flix. So let me do this whole, I guess I'm going to throw out to you a quick task of those who are tuning in. They don't know about the Dating Project. If you had 20 seconds to give them sort of a quick pitch on what it is. We've kind of been hinting around talking about it. Obviously, it deals with love and dating, but how would you describe the film through your own lenses as being one of the minds behind crafting and creating it?
Well, 50% of America is single. The way we seek and find love has drastically changed. The trends of hanging out, hooking up, texting, social media have created a dating deficit. And so is dating outdated? We explore this through the lives of 5 single people ages 18 to 40.
Now that was very concise, and it was literally about 20 seconds. So that was perfect.
I did it then.
It's as though you've done this before. Well, but what you did in this movie is it's so compelling because you kind of, as you're watching it, you really start to root for the people you're following, right? The individual stories you're telling, you want them to find love. You want them to work through the issues that they're sharing. And as you said, it's very vulnerable. I mean, you're really diving in, and the individuals, I'm not going to use the word characters because these are real life people, but the individuals you're talking with, they're sharing very personal details about their struggles. and about their relationships. And that's really compelling watching it, I think, because a lot of people as viewers can see themselves at some point in their life, maybe now, or maybe in the past, or maybe it'll be at some point in the future, in those very positions. And so what would you say for you, because you went into this, you were obviously captivated by the topic, you start to research it, what were some of the most shocking and surprising details and facts that you learned about love and relationships as you were going through the process?
That's a great question. I think the universality of the situation and the collapse of the dating culture, really people floundering within relationships and without, and the pervasive sense of loneliness, which I really think has only heightened since this pandemic. That really is even probably more of a striking point, is that so many people are lonely and we're looking for connection, and the surprising number of ways in which physically we think that that is going to be the way that we're going to fulfill that human connection we're longing for, and because that's what we're sold. Turn on the TV, look at a billboard, look at a magazine. We're sold that this is what's going to fulfill you and make you happy. But we found it wasn't making people happy. It was making people more lonely, more insecure, more of a sense of loss, at chipping away of that very foundation of their heart and soul. And so to reclaim that, and for people to be able to say it's not what I want, and realize that they aren't alone. And I think that was one thing we found as well, especially with Cecilia, just realizing you're not the only one who feels that way, when sometimes you kind of feel like you're on this planet of your own. So there's a universality in what people are feeling and experiencing, and it isn't necessarily what culture's telling them is going to fulfill them. Hasn't done that, as we know it's not going to.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing to me that's so interesting, the universal nature of it, and people feeling like they're the only ones. And so if people are watching this right now and they're feeling that way, knowing that you're not the only one. I mean, the statistic, you said 50% of people are single. Is that what you said? So that's half of the half of the people in this population go. So people are going through this, and there are different circumstances and elements, but that universality of this is fascinating to me. How did it change you? And I would imagine throughout the process, but how did it personally change you going through this process, creating the documentary, and then delivering that final product where you get to see these beautiful stories unfold?
Now I'm in the hot seat, right? I'm one of the datables being interviewed. No, throughout this, I think you can't help but, in stories, especially I think in documentaries, you can't help but have to ask yourself some of the same questions you're asking the individuals you're talking to, and in
Mm.
sharing their stories. And like you said earlier, you may see yourself in one of these individuals over the course of the film. You might identify with something they're going through, an experience that they've had, and I had that same recollection. Even with Rashida and working too much, and kind of looking at the ways in which you're approaching life and saying, okay, we're talking to all these people. I got to talk to myself as well. How am I approaching relationships? How am I investing my time and energy, and where am I putting my priorities? So, and I think each of us along the way in this film who worked on the project, we kind of took a hard look at our own lives, which is natural. And then seeing these people, these individuals in the movie, just really fell in love with them as people. And like you said, you're rooting for them. We're rooting for them too. And these things are happening in real time. And you just really you want them to have the joy that they're searching for in their life, and the way that they're intended to have that joy. And so seeing them on the big screen, and knowing that they felt proud of the production, that was a beautiful moment. I mean, getting anything finished and seeing it is a huge gift. So, but then knowing them as people, because we're all human, and to have this experience, and hopefully this experience will resonate with the viewers who watch it on Pure Flix, that they will see something of themselves.
Absolutely. And that, to me, that's always really good art and really good movie making, when you can kind of see yourself in some way. And I really felt that way about all of these people, and they were all very different. And I don't want to spoil it. And you've given some great little hints there. One of the people we haven't talked about, Professor Cronin, and I don't want to spoil the assignment and what she worked on, but what was it that led you toward her and her work? Because I thought it was very interesting, some of the experts you included, particularly her.
Well, like the grace of God, I think, led us to her, because she was just. Catherine's sister, the producer's sister, was helping with the project. She was doing research, and she said this professor at Boston College is doing this. She's called the dating doctor, and there's this article. And I'm like, oh, that's just perfect, because we were looking for experts, like we want to do in a documentary, bring in different voices. And she ended up having a completely different role than we intended. because she is so captivating and she knows the subject matter. But so we called her, we emailed her, we called her again, we emailed her again. She's really focused on her vocation, which is teaching. And so we did finally get through to her, and thank goodness, she was very open to the idea, and wanting the idea of dating and this topic to be explored on a higher level. What she's doing at Boston College has been emulated around the country in the way that she's approaching this dating assignment in this class. So she was just such an value add. She's so relatable, and really, you've seen the film. I mean, she just really speaks. She speaks to more than just college students. She speaks to, I think, wherever you are in your life and your journey. She's a real gift to the students at Boston College.
You can see her relating to those students. And as you watch the film, you see that connection. And one of the things that I found so fascinating about the dating project, and again, I don't want to spoil it, but watching people have these epiphanies of, oh, maybe what culture is telling me about relationships and love isn't accurate. Maybe I've had it wrong. And so for you as a filmmaker and as a producer who went into this, why do you think, and maybe this is probably more of a cultural question, but why do you think things have changed so dramatically? Why have we landed where we are right now when it comes to love and dating in our culture?
That's a great question, and I think it happens like anything in life. It happens over time, to where these little things happen, and you don't even necessarily at the time realizing what's going on. It's the little given, the little here, the little. So eventually, you look and you're like, we had so many people, older people, especially grandparents, be like, "What happened? When did this happen? What is going on?" And it really happens right in front of us. Just we didn't notice, and we kind of, I don't know if we let our guard down. I think we just the noise is coming in so loudly of how we're supposed to be in relationship and what that means. It's so loud that it's sometimes hard to hear kind of the voice that we need to be listening to and how we're supposed to be in relationship. So I don't think it was one moment and something struck and everything was destroyed. I think over time, with little defeats along the way, we ended up in this situation where honestly people don't know how to date or use a phone, or you'll see it seems like it's not possible, but I think when you see the film you'll realize maybe kind of where we are, and in a hope we can try to address that.
Yeah, there's so many little elements of it, it seems, that have sort of coalesced to create this scenario. And I love what you said there about it being something that has happened over time. And then you have to kind of take that, you have to do that assessment, which I think is what this film helps you do. Pause, reflect, understand, and evaluate where things are, and then try to change it, not only for ourselves, but for the culture at large, because it really does seem like a lot of people in this area are hurting and lost and confused, and they're looking for that companionship, as you were saying, and they're not finding it because the mechanisms are not there to really support it. So that really came through in the film. Now, I want to ask you kind of a different question now about your faith and the role it plays in your filmmaking, because it seems like you've picked some really fascinating projects, this being one of them. And so what role does belief and sort of worldview play in the types of projects that you dive into?
My faith is everything. It's the foundation of who I am, and I can't separate it from the way I approach and look at the world, because I know who created me and I know what I was created for, and it just informs everything. So I don't feel like I have to separate that. I mean, we all have our worldviews. The stories I want to tell are true, good, and beautiful. To meet people where they are. And everybody's on their own faith journey, and they struggle with things, and they grasp and they grapple. So I just want to come in and tell stories that meet people where they are, and hopefully point them to some direction that's north. My job as a filmmaker is to make entertaining films, inspiring films. My job is not to convert people. That's God's job. I just want to use the gifts and talents that He's given me for His greater glory. And in doing so, that very much informs the projects that I choose to be a part of and the stories that I choose to tell, because that's very important to me.
That's powerful, and I think it's a great word for all of us, regardless of what industry we work in and what we're doing. You don't separate your worldview out; it informs what you do. But that mission of what you've done, and in this film, you see that you're exploring something and you're doing it in a really unique way. How would you say the dating project is different from some of the other films that you've worked on?
Well, So since the dating project, I've worked on two more biopics. In some ways, you know their story because it's biographically laid out. One might have a book, or one is based on events. You're still going to have surprises along the way because you're going to hear stories and voices of things you weren't expecting, or didn't think you would encounter, and it shifts and moves the story a little bit in the way that you might not be expecting it. And with the dating project, it was really like, we didn't know where it was going. I don't know how the story's going to end. There is no book. We're kind of writing this book as we go because we are basing it off what they're experiencing at the time. So it was a very unique type of documentary in which who knows how it's going to end. You can only
Yeah.
hope that it ends in a good place for everybody. But at the end of the day, that was yet to be written.
Yeah, and that's amazing. That's actually fun, right? You know, you don't know how it's gonna go. It's like it's not choose your own ending, but it takes you along this. The characters choose the people provide that ending for you as you're working through it. And so that's powerful. My last question for you is just, what is your hope? And we spoke a little bit about this earlier on, but let's say somebody goes over to Pure Flix, they put on the dating project. When they're done watching it, what is your hope for what they're thinking and feeling and experiencing?
Well, that's a great question. I think it would depend on what journey that particular person is on. I hope that when whoever watches this, and especially in this time, but always, that they feel inspired and encouraged. They feel as if they're not alone. They might have the impulse to reach out to somebody for a real connection. They might understand and believe in their worth in a different way than maybe they have before. That they'll understand that they're not alone. That there is still possibility, that all is not lost, and that I hope that they take the dating assignment and experience something that is different, that asks them to be courageous. And again, it's at the end of the day, I hope they'll share it with others, and that they'll leave feeling better than when they turned on the film.
Well, listen, I so appreciate that. And for anybody who is watching, you can go over to Pure Flix right now and watch the dating project. Thank you so much for sharing with us today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here.